Welcome back to yet another episode of History of Gaming Metal Gear. We start Metal Gear Rising today, which of course means we do the Metal Gear Rising introduction. To let you guys know where we are, here is the entire series that we've been playing so far. We have done Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, technical review of Metal Gear Solid 1 on PlayStation 1, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes full playthrough on GameCube, Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, Metal Gear Acid 1, 2, Portable Ops, Metal Gear Solid 4, and we just wrapped up Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. That leads us into Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, a 2013 title released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. As you know well by now, whenever we start talking Metal Gear, we always start off by talking Hideo Kojima. Alongside the announcement of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker during the 2009 E3, Kojima also announced that he was working on another title. This would soon come out to be a game called Metal Gear Solid Rising. Notice the name difference, Metal Gear Solid Rising. It would be developed by his team, but without his involvement. This came, of course, as a huge surprise. Unlike the development of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Kojima would actually stay disconnected from the development of this game. During this time, Kojima was seen in a Nintendo 3DS interview where he mentions he was interested in making a Metal Gear Solid for the 3DS. This would later become a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater for the 3DS in 2012. To much excitement for Kojima fans, Hideo was promoted to Executive Vice President and Corporate Officer of Konami Digital Entertainment on April 1st of 2011, and no, it wasn't an April Fool's joke. This was a massive move in the right direction, a lot of people felt, as Kojima had a lot of love, and putting him that high up in Konami could be nothing but a good thing, and we'll see how that maybe wasn't the case. Later in 2012, Kojima would finish work on something called the Fox Engine, a custom-made and proprietary game engine. He then begins to leak subtle secrets via Twitter about the use of this new engine. This is a new trait we'll see him continue to exhibit as it creates a great viral phenomenon amongst his fans. Gets a lot of hype built up and he can trickle out information. He loves it. So the first teaser that he gives us with Twitter, he tweets out an image of the DVD for Silent Hill, the movie, but then the text in the tweet mentions, it was translated from Japanese, but what he was saying is basically he was expressing his excitement and the potential use of the Fox engine on the 8th generation platforms. Bit weird to put that with the DVD box art of Silent Hill, so immediately fans begin speculating as to what this means. We won't find out what it means until much later. In fact, until after 2013, which means we will cover that in the next game. When we get into Metal Gear Solid 5, we'll discuss what was going on there with his little hints towards Silent Hill, which is honestly the start of the Kojima Konami story, which we'll get into great detail. You see here, so it's after this game's completed, so we'll cover it, but what we'll be surrounding is PT, Metal Gear Solid 5's development, and all of the other details related to Kojima's departure from Konami, inevitably. So let's talk about the development of the video game, Metal Gear Rising, which is a fantastic story all on its own. The video game has Raiden as a main character. That would have been laughed out of the studios if it wasn't for the massive character overhaul he got in Metal Gear Solid 4. But even still, this wasn't something Kojima ever thought about. He never put this idea on the table. The initial title of the series was still Metal Gear Solid Rising, which would indicate it would show some kind of impact to Solid Snake's story, whether through Naked Snake, aka Big Boss, or Solid Snake himself. In fact, the characters Rosemary and Raiden make a joke during one of the secret videos in Metal Gear Solid 3 where they discuss a game called Metal Gear Raiden Snake Eraser. A game where we would have Raiden headlining the title and stealing the spotlight from Snake. Clearly an example of early jokes made by Kojima and the production team showing that Raiden would never be a main character. But despite Kojima's initial intent for the game, he made a commitment to be more hands-off and kept true to it this time, unlike he did with Peace Walker and pretty much every title previously. So much so that it was stated the idea to make Raiden the main character of this game was actually the idea of Kojima production staff and not Hideo's at all, and it ended up sticking. That's how far off this project he was. So there we have it. Raiden's going to be the star. Kojima Productions starts working on Metal Gear Solid Rising. And at some point in late 2010 or early 2011, we're not sure, it's clear that the production team was not going to be able to fully develop the title by their own means. The game was already in development for a long time once this was realized, and at some point during that era, Kojima secretly and quietly canceled the development of Metal Gear Solid Rising. It didn't go public, nobody knew. The game just stopped being developed. Then something happened. In early 2011, when Kojima, for the second time ever, lets another studio touch his creation, he's in talks about somebody able to get their hands on this. And it's at some convention. We don't have a lot of details on it, but something happens at this convention, and there's a conversation about somebody else, another studio, touching the Metal Gear series. So of course, this was the first time this happened was Silicon Knights, when they remade Metal Gear Solid as Twin Snakes on the GameCube. Though this time we're not talking about a remake of an existing title, we're talking about a full creation under mostly someone else's creative views. Kojima hands development of this game over to Platinum Games in 2011 after these conversations took place. They took the game and retitled it as Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, a reference to Kojima's desire to get revenge and vengeance on the failed title Metal Gear Solid Rising. So let's talk about the production team that winds up doing the most of the work on this game, Platinum Games, right? This studio was founded in 2007 through a merger of other studios. They first show up on the scene in 2009 with a really neat Wii title called Mad World. Check it out, it's awesome, visually stunning. They move on to make a real name for themselves with games like Bayonetta and Vanquish before they get their hands on Metal Gear. Their latest and greatest game that you guys probably have heard of is Nier Automata. Really big fan favorite there. These folks have a knack for flair and over-the-top action, and Raiden is a perfect character for that style. The notable names involved in this merger that make up Platinum Games is Mikami, Inaba, and Kamiya, all three of which were previously working for Capcom. It would be Inaba, more accurately, Atsushi Inaba, that would be the producer on Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. He was requested by Kojima himself to be the one who works on the game, and he did a great job with it. So looking at the game, as expected, we will assume control of Raiden, which means katana-wielding awesomeness worthy of a cyborg, is what this game is all about. And as far as the timeline for the events of this game, it takes place, ironically, this year, 2018. We see Raiden working for a PMC group called Maverick Security Consulting Incorporated. This is 4 years after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4, which means the Patriots are destroyed and the PMC groups of 2014 have splintered off into smaller factions. These bad guys we'll be fighting initially were intended to be human characters, but due to the incredible melee action we get with the free-slicing blade mode, there was a very early decision to change all enemies from humans into cyborgs so that you don't have players literally eviscerating human beings. Though, you know, they're made out of robot parts, so it makes it okay to kill them. You'll soon see why this seems to be a very reasonable choice once we get into the gameplay. We also see a lot of bullet time and quick time events in this game, which is typical of this studio. They seem to take a lot of notes from the Devil May Cry series. And it also boasts a hefty combat system in Rising, allowing for combos and parrying much like good fighting games. Another entertaining mechanic is the system called the Zandatsu, which is cutting through enemies and taking their parts while cutting through them. Like energy, items, cyborg parts, ammo, all these features are brought together along with the others previously mentioned to make the player truly feel like a cyborg ninja, a legend that Raiden has turned into after the events of Metal Gear Solid 4. So Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance was originally released on February 19th, 2013 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. It scored an 83% on Metacritic, on 83% on Metacritic, and Rising can be compared with other fantastic titles from 2013, and it holds up against them pretty well. So the titles we'll be comparing this to is Metro Last Light, Saints Row 4, Battlefield 4, Super Mario 3D World, the re-release of Tomb Raider, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, The Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, and Grand Theft Auto 5. So, I do want to state that looking at that list of games, you can now understand why initial response of Metal Gear Rising was poor. People didn't look at Metal Gear Rising as a awesome game at the time, because this game, compared to games like BioShock Infinite, Grand Theft Auto 5, and The Last of Us, those 3 games are insanely good games. Metal Gear Rising they got stacked up bad that year. But as time progressed and the the appeal of those 3 games started to fade a little bit, Metal Gear fans started to look back on Rising and gain a new love for it. It actually has shown through as one of the better Metal Gear games now, and it was just a victim of its release date, which a lot of games sometimes have that happen. So that is our history lesson for Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. We're going to go ahead and get into the gameplay here. I hope you guys are excited, because I am.